Okay, in the previous video, we got a couple guidelines on how to graph a parabola. And here are basically most of the guidelines. So we're going to follow these guidelines to try to graph these next couple of ones. So what we want to do is graph. Okay, so here's my first problem. F of x is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. Okay, so let's try to graph something that looks like this. So the first thing that we want to do, if you go back up, says that we want to determine if it goes upward or downward, and that depends on a. So a in this case is a positive 1. So what that tells me is that this graph is going to open upward. So parabola opens upward. Okay. That's the first thing that we know. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is find the vertex. Okay, so vertex. So vertex, if you remember, there's a formula for the vertex. X equals negative b over 2a. Okay, so here's going to be negative b. B in this case is going to be this negative 6 over 2 times a, which is 1. So negative and a negative give me a positive 6 over 2. It's going to give me a 3. Y, all we got to do is just plug it back in there. So it's going to be 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 8. So this is going to give me 9 minus 18 plus 8. Okay. Then I'm going to put all of this into my calculator, and I'm going to get negative 1. So my vertex in this case is going to be 3 comma negative 1. That's what I got. Now that I have the vertex, I want to find the x-intercepts and the y-intercepts. Okay, and I have to be very careful because if there's no x-intercepts, I can plot any other numbers. Okay, so x-intercept. So with x-intercept, we're going to let the y equal 0. So I'm going to set this equal to 0. 0 is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. Okay, we can try to factor this. Okay, so we're going to get 2 and 4 because 2 times 4 is going to give me 8. How am I going to get a negative 6 if both of these are negative? Okay, so this is going to be x minus 2 equals 0. X minus 4 equals 0. So this gives me x equals 2 and x equals 4. So my x-intercepts are going to be 2 comma 0 because x equals 2 when y equals 0 and 4 comma 0. So these are going to be my x-intercepts. And then finally, let's figure out my y-intercept. Now my y-intercept is when x equals 0. So y is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8. So y is going to be equal to 0 squared minus 6 times 0 plus 8. That's going to just give me an 8. So my y-intercept is going to be when x equals 0, my y is 8. That's my y-intercept. Okay, so now I basically got everything. Okay, so now I just want to go ahead and graph it. So I have, here is my x and my y. My vertex is going to be 3 comma negative 1. So here's going to be 3 comma negative 1. So that's where it starts. My x-intercepts, here are my x-intercepts, 2, 0. So here's 2, 0. Here is 4, 0. Notice that in relation to the vertex, these are symmetrical. So if I go 1 unit this way at 2, is the same thing as 1 unit to the other side at 4. And then my y-intercept, which is going to be 0a. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is going to go through here. And then all I gotta do is just connect these dots. Okay, I can't draw, but here they are. And that's all there really is to it. So as long as you follow these guidelines, you should be okay. All right, so let's do another example. Okay, so let's say we want to graph, and this time we want to graph f of x is equal to negative x squared plus 8x minus 16. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do, first thing is let's figure out whether it's going to be opening up or down. And in this case, let's look at the number in front of the x squared is a negative, so that means it's going to be going down. So we actually have a sad parabola this time. So it's going to look like that. For the second one, let's figure out the vertex. All right. So the vertex is going to be x equals negative b over 2a. So we are going to have negative b, in this case is 8, over 2 times a. A in this case is negative 1. So we're going to have negative 8 divided by negative 2. This gives me positive 4. And then our y is basically just plugging in the 4. Negative 4 squared plus 8 times 4 minus 16. Now you have to be very careful because this negative is on the outside. So that thing is not being squared. So 4 squared is going to be 16, but then I still have that negative on the outside. This is going to give me a positive 32 minus this 16. So what I'm going to get in this case is just going to be 0. So my vertex is going to be at 4, 0. That's my vertex. For 3, we want to find our x-intercepts and our y-intercepts. So my x-intercept in this case is going to be, so I'm going to let y equal 0 because that's how we solve for the x-intercept. So we're going to have 0 is equal to negative x squared plus 8x minus 16. Again, you can use the quadratic formula if you'd like. So we're going to have x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So I will have negative b, this is going to be 8, plus or minus square root 8 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 16 divided by 2 times negative 1. So I'm going to have negative 8 plus or minus square root 64. So this is a negative and a negative is going to give me a positive. A positive and a negative is going to give me another negative. 4 times 1 gives me 4. 4 times 16 gives me 64 divided by negative 2. So what's going to happen here is that here I'm going to have a square root of 0 divided by negative 2. Well, I end up negative 8 plus or minus 0 over negative 2. Well, when I separate this, I'm actually going to get the same exact answer. Because when I get negative 8 plus 0 divided by negative 2, and then negative 8 minus 0 divided by negative 2, notice that I still get the answer of 4. So basically here we have a case where you only have one x-intercept. In this case, it's going to be x equals 4 when y was equal to 0. Ah, you must see a similarity with the vertex. Okay, the vertex is the same thing as the x-intercept. All right, so now what is my y-intercept? So my y-intercept is when x equals 0. So we're going to have y is equal to negative x squared plus 8x minus 16. I'm going to plug in 0. Y is equal to negative 0 squared plus 8 times 0 minus 16. This goes away, and I'm left with negative 16. So my point is going to be when x is equal to 0, my y is negative 16. All right. So now let's go ahead and plot this. We are going to start first with our vertex. We know it's going to open down. Our vertex in this case is going to be 4, 0. So at 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. Okay. Then, that was my vertex. My x-intercept is also 4, 0. So that's just going to stay there. It's the same one. My y-intercept is 0, negative 16. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Oh, not 17, 16. So this is negative 16. Let's pretend that's negative 16. Okay. All right, so, and we know that it's going downward, so it's going to go further down. Now, one thing that you should do probably is you can put in more points. So, for example, you can plot in a 3 if you'd like to make it a little bit more precise, or you can even plot in a 5 to see what's going on the other side. So I can plug in x equals 5 if you want. X equals 5. So we're going to have y is equal to negative 5 squared plus 8 times 5 minus 16. This is going to give me negative 25 plus 40 minus 16. So what am I going to get? Negative 25 plus 40 minus 16. This is going to give me negative 1. So when x was equal to negative 5, my y value was negative 1. So 5 comma negative 1. 5, negative 1. So that just helps you plot more points and make it a little bit more precise. Okay, I'm not a really good drawer, but you can just have that. And because of symmetry, right, this is where the axis of symmetry is. If this is negative 1 at 5, then at 3 it's also going to be negative 1 because these things are symmetrical. Okay, so this is just 5 comma negative 1. Okay, so really that's all there is to it. Whenever you have complex roots or complex intercepts, or when you only have one X-intercept, you can always plot more points if you want. But usually when you have the vertex, the X and the Y intercepts, you should be pretty alright. And you see that it's going downward, just like I said we predicted. Okay?